Hello, my name is Catherine Ritz, and I am a clinical assistant professor and the program director for the Modern Foreign Language Education and World Language Education program, as well as curriculum and teaching at the Boston University Wheelock College of Education and Human Development. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about getting your world language teaching license in Massachusetts. So if you're interested in becoming a world language teacher, what should you know? Well, so first of all, if you want to work in a public school in any state, you have to have a teaching license. And unfortunately, in the United States, each state sets its own rules. So it can be somewhat difficult to navigate state to state. I'm only going to focus on Massachusetts in this video. Honestly, I've looked at other state requirements and it's confusing. So if you're interested in getting licensed in another state, I would advise you to find a teacher or a methods instructor in that state who can help you navigate the process. If you're interested in working in a private school or perhaps a charter school, often the teaching license is optional or it's not required at all. A big difference, however, is that public school teaching tends to be much better paid and you're also in a union position. So there's a lot of benefits, but you are required to get the infamous teaching license. Okay, so what are some things to know in Massachusetts? So the teaching license here, which license am I seeking? So that's sort of a first question. So what license should you be looking for? Basically, in Massachusetts, there's two levels. We have the foreign language, and where you see language italicized, that would be filled in with whichever language it is that you are seeking, either at the 512 level or the pre-K 6 level. There's honestly very little difference in terms of the requirements for each of these licenses. But they have added, it used to be that if you got one, you could very easily add the other, but they've now added that if you have, let's say, the 512 license, you need to have some coursework or seminar or workshop. So you need to submit evidence of having attended something that would be relevant for that pre-K 6. So it's not a high bar to add the second license, but there are some slight differences in the requirements. What languages are there licenses for? So in Massachusetts, you can see here the list of languages for which you can obtain a teaching license. If you teach a language or are interested in teaching a language that is not listed here, typically when there isn't a license for an area in which a school wants to offer something, whether it's a language or something else, it's up to that individual school to determine the criteria for that area. So it doesn't mean you can't teach it, but you may or may not find that an opportunity even to teach that language to begin with. So here's a list of the languages for which there are licenses. What level license? So there's a difference between the type of license, so 512 or pre-K 6, as well as sort of the kind of license, so sort of what we might think of as the level of the license. It's a little confusing. So I want to talk about mainly points of entry. There's three big categories of licenses: provisional, initial, and professional. There are also temporary and emergency licenses, which I'm not going to talk about in this video because these are the sort of the most common ones that we want to think about. When we're thinking of a point of entry, so how can you start? Where can I begin to get my license? The two places you could generally begin are provisional or initial. The professional license I will touch on, but that's only for people who are more experienced and have been teaching for a while and already have either provisional or initial. So the provisional teaching license is provisional, so it's temporary. It's a 5-year license. It is non-renewable. So once it ends, you cannot continue teaching. That is it. There are 3 criteria for getting the provisional license. You must have a bachelor's degree or an equivalent of a bachelor's degree. If you're coming from another country and you need to get your bachelor's degree or equivalent translated, please check the Department of Education's website because they do require translation from particular service companies. So you don't want to just get it translated by anyone. You want to check them first. Then you must get a passing score on the Communications and Literacy MTEL. MTEL is the Massachusetts test for educator licensure. The communications and literacy skills is required for all teachers. Every area must pass this test. International students, so non-native speakers of English, tend to find there's two subcomponents, one of which focuses on writing. The writing section tends to be a little bit more challenging. So I would encourage you to look at resources before you take this test. You also need to score, get a passing score on what's called the subject matter MTEL in your language. There are not MTELs available for every language for which we offer a license. And I will talk through that in a moment. So the link that you see here is one of the most helpful links that I have found on the DESE website, the Licensure Requirements tool. So this is a sort of drop-down menu where you can tell DESE exactly what you're looking for in what license you're trying to get. And it will tell you the requirements, although it is a little confusing. So we'll walk through it. So let's start category, academic teacher, foreign language, for example, French, grade 512. Let's start with provisional. And this is my first teaching license in Massachusetts. So after I search and input that criteria, I find, lo and behold, here is what I need to get the 512 provisional license for French or any of our languages, with a caveat, which I will talk about, any language for which there is an MTEL. What do you need? You need a passing score on the communications and literacy skills test. As I said, that's for every teacher. You need a bachelor's degree, and you need to pass the French subject matter test. So that is sort of the minimum level of entry to getting a teaching license in Massachusetts. The pros of the provisional license, so as you may have figured out, it's pretty quick. You can immediately, assuming you have a bachelor's degree and that you manage to pass both of the MTELs, you can immediately get your teaching license. On the other hand, you have no teacher training. So many of us in the field think this is a huge disadvantage to the provisional is just because you can pass the MTEL doesn't mean you know what it means to sort of find yourself in front of a class of students and know what to do. So there's no teacher training, but it's a quick way to get the license. If you do have experience in other areas and you want to get the license, it might make sense for you. The license also, a con, it expires in 5 years. It is non-renewable, and you must, in those 5 years, achieve the initial license if you want to continue teaching. And there are additional requirements to get to initial. So you're not sort of done, that's it, all I need to do. You need to work ahead to get to the initial teaching license. So if you're starting at the initial teaching license, you should know it's also valid for 5 years. However, it's renewable. So you have essentially 10 full years. And also it doesn't, even though it says 5 years and then renewable once, it doesn't really expire. So even if you have not done anything and you sort of leave teaching and come back, your license is still there and you can sort of revive it. So it's a much more stable license. There's 4 criteria now to get the initial license. So you still need your bachelor's degree or an equivalent. You again need to pass the communications and literacy skills MTEL, and you need to pass the subject matter MTEL in your language if there is one. However, to start at the initial teaching license, you need to complete what's called a Massachusetts Foreign Language Approved Program, or sometimes also called an endorsed program in your license. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but there's different teacher education programs that have been approved by DESE, by the Department of Education, to endorse you for the license in different areas. If you had provisional and you want to move to initial, that also is sort of your threshold of getting initial. You need to complete some type of approved program, and that can mean different things, to get to initial. It may or may not be a master's program. You need a master's in the long term anyway, so might as well get a master's program, but there's some different pathways that you could choose. But to start at the initial license, you must do a teacher approved program. So let's look again at our licensure requirements tool. So now I'm still doing academic teacher, foreign language, French, or whichever language, 512, initial here. And let's say I'm doing my first teaching license in MA. If you already had provisional, what you would do in that last section, tell us about yourself, drop down, you would say advancing my license. And it would tell you something different. So here's what we need. If we're starting at initial in this area, we have, again, our communications and literacy skill, completion of a Massachusetts approved program for, in this case, French 512. And we need that subject matter test. And of course, our bachelor's degree. So the pros of the initial teaching license, starting at the initial license, a pro is that you've gone through a teacher preparation program. So you have, in a teacher prep program, you're going to do student teaching. So if you are new to teaching, this is a good way to not have no idea what to do on that very first day of class. The teaching license is also more stable. As I mentioned, it really can't expire and it's valid for a longer amount of time. A con, of course, is this is going to take longer than getting the provisional. The teacher education programs, often it's a 1 or a 2 year program. The program I run in the master's in teaching that I run, it's a 3 semester, so 1 year with a summer semester program. And of course, there's a cost. So the teacher education programs are not free. So again, you're sort of weighing what makes sense for me. The professional teaching license, so this is not a place you can begin, even if you're coming from another state. The professional teaching license is only for teachers who have the initial license and have taught for at least 3 years under that license. So even if you have provisional, you can't jump to professional, you have to get to initial first and teach for at least 3 years under that license. To get to professional also in Massachusetts, you must have a master's degree. If you already had a master's degree when you got initial, you need to complete 12 additional graduate credits in your subject matter, i.e. in your language and or related pedagogy. So let's talk a little bit about the MTEL, the Massachusetts Test for Educator Licensure. So as I've mentioned, the communication and literacy skills test is for everyone. There's a reading subtest. And there's a writing subtest. The writing subtest being more problematic, typically for non-native speakers of English. The subject matter test is also required for and available for different languages. The link you see here will give you all the information about the MTEL as well as sample tests that you could practice with. Which languages have MTELs? So I showed you a list of all the languages for which we have teaching licenses. Not all of them have MTELs. We only have MTELs for Chinese Mandarin, French, German, Italian, Portuguese, and Russian. So if you teach one of these languages and are seeking a license in one of these languages, you must take the MTEL in that language. And I will talk about what to do if you don't teach one of the languages you see here. So first, the communications and literacy skills test. So when you go to that link that I just shared, the DESI MTEL information, you will find out again what the format of the test looks like. You'll find out how long it's going to take. See here, sorry, 4-hour test. So get ready. How you can book your appointment, when it's offered. So since COVID, they've started offering communications and literacy online. I hope they will continue to do that. What my qualifying score is. So I need at least a 240 on this to pass. How much it costs to register for this test. And again, the test preparation material. So they usually provide sample tests, sometimes multiple sample tests with answers. So you can sort of see how you would do and get comfortable with the format. The subject matter tests, again, you can find the format, how long this will take, how you can, when it's offered, and often these are not offered. The subject matter tests, particularly for languages, are not offered year round. So what you see here are the months that these traditionally have been offered. They were not offering these online when COVID started, so you must be in person as of now for these tests. Qualifying score, cost for the test, and test preparation materials, including those good old sample tests. As a small caveat, the language tests, MTELs, are really, really out of date in terms of methodology. I'm licensed in French and Spanish, and they have not changed in the 15 years that I have, or actually no, more now that I've been in the field. It's the same test. I know they would like to update them, but it takes time. You're going to encounter a lot of random cultural facts. Who knows why they're in there. So just prepare yourself. It's definitely worth going through the test preparation material for these. So if your language does not have an MTEL, what happens? So what do I do here? So I'd like to walk through the example of Arabic, and there's a different answer to this question depending on whether you're starting at provisional or initial. So let's start with provisional. So if I want to get the Arabic provisional license, or any of the other languages for which there is no MTEL, including, Korean, Haitian Creole, any number of the other languages for which you did not see an MTEL listed. Here is the list. So I went through that same tool, the teacher requirements tool, and this is what popped up. So there's a lot of information here. So let's walk through this. In a nutshell, this breaks down to: you need your bachelor's degree. You need to pass that communications and literacy MTEL, just like you do for any teacher. And then you need, so there's bachelor's degree, there's the passing score in communications and literacy MTEL. And then you need what they call a competency review. So this is where it gets a little bit complicated. So everything that's not circled in red, I did a little green bar on the left, needs to be submitted as part of your quote unquote competency review. Let's walk through this. So I've taken out the bachelor's and I've taken out the communications and literacy skills. So the items you see remaining are what's required for the competency review. So one piece, this is perhaps simple in terms of what you need to do for this, but you need to show coverage of spoken and written command of a standard version of the target language, the version used by a formally educated speaker of the language. In order to demonstrate your competency in this competency review, so you're submitting a lot of documents to DESE to demonstrate your competency. For this one, you have to submit a score report from the ACTFL oral proficiency interview, otherwise known as the OPI, and the ACTFL writing proficiency test, the WPT. There is a fee for each of these. I believe the ACTFL OPI runs around $100, and the WPT might be less expensive, but that's something you would need to schedule with ACTFL. An organization called Language Testing International, LTI, administers these assessments. I have taken the OPI in French. It's a phone interview, so it's like a 20 to 30 minute phone call, and they check to make sure you can speak the language proficiently. You then get a score report, and in order to be considered competent, you need to have a minimum of an advanced low score on both the OPI and the WPT. So you would need to schedule that independently, take those two assessments, get your score report, and then submit it to DESE. So sorry, I don't make this up. This is complicated, I realize, but this is what you got to do. Everything else, all of the other documents you see are requirements here. So introductory knowledge of significant literary and non-literary texts, etc. Introductory knowledge of the arts, historical traditions, genres, etc. Introductory knowledge of political, social, and intellectual history of the country, and so on. All of these, you can demonstrate competency by showing, providing documentation that you've taken coursework or a seminar or a workshop, or have engaged in some school-based mentoring or coaching that focuses on these areas. So you would either submit a transcript, you would submit a letter from the school explaining what you had done, or any number of things, but you would need to demonstrate for all of these different items that you have achieved competency. So this is definitely a bit more of a hurdle to jump through to get to the provisional license. What if you are starting or you're interested in teaching Arabic or another language that does not have an MTEL and starting at the initial license? So there's a different answer here. So again, using the Licensure Requirements tool, we see the following. So as always, I need to have a bachelor's degree. I need to have that passing score on communications and literacy skill test, just like everybody else. And then here's where it's a little bit different than the provisional. You need to, if you're starting at initial, you need to complete a Massachusetts approved program for Arabic 512. And as you can see here, it says subject matter test pending. I don't think they're going to do a subject matter test. Completion of an approved program for this field or level will satisfy this requirement. So you do not need to do that long competency review I just talked about. If you complete an approved program in Massachusetts for Arabic or for another area, you have met the competency and you do not need to take a subject matter test. I'm proud to say that my program at Boston University Wheelock College of Education and Human Development is the only approved program in Massachusetts for Arabic licensure. Unfortunately, we don't license in, we license in Arabic, Chinese, French, and Spanish. So not in another language area. But if you're looking for Arabic, we are the only approved program in the state. So this would prevent you from needing to do that full competency review. However, you are then going through a teacher education program, which is a one-year master's degree. So if you're looking for a teacher education program, they have a search feature as well to find education preparation programs. So you can look here. So academic teacher, foreign language, whichever language you're looking at, your level. If you're looking, presuming you're looking post-bachelor's, you're looking at your post-bac, and the link you see here will get you to this page. So you can pop in the language that you're looking for, foreign language French, foreign language Arabic, foreign language Mandarin, etc. And you'll find a list of programs that are approved by the Department of Education, by DESE, and that you could enroll in that would get you to that initial license. So for example, if we searched for French endorsed programs or approved programs, we would find a list such as the one you see here. And here's my little program here, my Boston University program. So you would find all of the possible programs and then could choose from them. So if you are ready to seek your license in Massachusetts, what I would say first, there's lots of reasons why you might go for provisional, but if you do have the opportunity to start in an endorsed teacher education program, you get the training you need to really be effective for day one. There's reasons why that might not make sense for you, or you might not feel that you need that, but definitely if you're new to teaching, I would strongly recommend finding a teacher education program to start with. And that would get you to the initial license. You also will then need to create what's called an ELAR account on the Department of Education website. ELAR stands for Educator License and Renewal, and that's where you're going. That sort of tracks everything. You get an ID number, all of your information gets tracked in the ELAR system, and that's where you would apply, where you renew your license, where you keep all of your information in there. And I'll give you the link to that in a minute. You then would register for your MTEL. So remember, communications and literacy skills and possibly a subject matter test if they have one. And then you would submit your application in ELAR. You can submit the application for your license before you take the MTEL. And even before you finish the requirements for the license. And actually sometimes that is helpful because it tells you what you're missing. So you're like, I don't know, do I need this? Oh, okay, I'm going to apply, and then it'll tell me what I am missing. So here is the link to ELAR. And again, if you're brand new, you can use that to set up your ELAR account, and you'll get a unique ID number, and all of your information will be submitted in there. So I wish you all the best of luck. I know this is a lot of information. I wish they made licensure simpler, but it is what it is. I am more than happy to help new teachers get started and help navigate the teaching process in Massachusetts, or the licensure teaching process in Massachusetts. You have here my email address, as well as the link to the Master's in Teaching program that I run at Boston University. So once again, wishing you all the best of luck, and feel free to reach out as you need help. So nice to speak with you all, and good luck. Bye-bye.